Welcome, Pointer fans, to our second Wisdom Wednesday. Coming off of last Wednesday and our iconic athletic director and legend, Frank O'Brien, I couldn't be happier to announce our second Wisdom Wednesday. That's to have Coach Jack Bennett with us. Coach, thanks for coming on. We've got just a few things about your heralded career. 200 wins, 256 was your record at Stevens Point. And I'm sure we're going to talk about Win 200 here as we go, which was walking off the floor as a national champ, leading us to the 2004 and 5 NCAA Division III National Championship, and retired as our all-time winningest coach in men's basketball. What people don't always know about you, Coach, is that 33 years you were a head coach, a lot of those even at the high school level, and had winning seasons in 32 out of those 33 seasons. So, Jack, thanks for coming on. Coach, you've been, for our fans, most of them have watched you coach or seen you coach and understand the Bennett family and the history and the tradition. Just personally, from my standpoint, how impactful you've been in my first 4 years of coming on and being a mentor and helping me navigate the Pointer waters for sure. So, Coach, we're really appreciative to have you, and thanks for coming on to Wisdom Wednesday.
Well, thank you, Brad. I just want people to know I wear this dog's hat at all times, even when I go to bed at night. My wife says, take that hat off. I said, nope, this has got a lot of good memories. And this actually is a terrific idea on your part to do this, to celebrate a little bit of the tradition and just the good times here with Pointer Athletics. So I'm honored to be here with you, and let's let you take this thing wherever you want it to go.
Well, thanks for saying that, Coach. We're in tough times, and we want to make sure our fans, our recruits, our players, our alumni understand that Pointer Athletics, I say this every time, we won a conference championship in 17-18, and then I look and it's 19-17-18. The Pointer Athletics has been around a long time, and you're a big part of that. So we're going to jump into it. I've got a series of questions for you. Let our fans know a little bit more about you, or remind them about you. You had one of the most successful coaching careers in Pointer history. But tell us about your career before becoming a Pointer. What got you there, and talk to us about the early days of Coach Bennett.
Well, those early days started in a little northern town, Park Falls, Wisconsin. They're now Chequamegon High School. 2 years there, we were able to win a conference title, moved over to Marinette, Wisconsin. At that point, we were in the Bay, and we had some very nice ball clubs there. Then to Rapids, Lincoln, and that was perhaps my favorite high school job. Warm memories of that town and the players we had there, couple of state tournament teams, and just outstanding support from that community. Tried the college ranks, went to UW-Eau Claire for 5 years to assist. And we really did enjoy some great success. We started to take over the NAIA trips from UW-Stevens Point. My brother was here my first year as an assistant to Ken Anderson. They went with Terry Porter his senior year, and then we went the next 4 years to Kansas City. That was a huge rivalry. I learned some things to do over there and probably not to do as well. But I also enjoyed seeing the caliber of basketball up close and up front with what was then the WSUC, then it became the WIAC. After that, I went up to Rhinelander as an administrator, and they probably took care of me as well as any place, administrator, coach, taught one class in social studies, and thought I was going to remain there. But then the point job opened in '96. And, I owe this position to a number of people, my wife being willing to make the move, but Frank O'Brien and Dennis Tierney, God rest his soul, really were the ones that got in touch with me. And I hesitated even the first couple of times when my brother left, because he's been my mentor. He's been the guy that I've tried to pattern, probably poorly at times, but he was the one that I thought taught the game the right way, treated people the right way. And I didn't feel it was right to go there right after he left or even shortly after that. But in 96, it just seemed like it was the right time. And came down here. And I can say this, I'm not saying it because I'm on your program here, Brad. This was the highlight of my coaching career. And don't get me wrong, each place was special. And I think I'm as pleased and thankful for the fact that never in those 33 plus years coaching did we have a losing record in conference play. 1 year at Rapids, we were 1 game under 500. And I just like the fact that consistency and trying to do it the right way stands the test of time. And, you know, at the end of the career here, we'll talk about that later. It was more than I could have hoped for.
You know, you mentioned something, Coach, that I think has really taken me back in the 4 years I've been here. I knew about it, but I didn't understand it. And being here for the last 4 years, it's at times, you know, breathtaking or overwhelming, or it's special. But the question I've got for you, Coach, is somebody who's seen this from your brother's perspective all the way through yours, your sons. I mean, Point Athletics has been part of you and your family a long time. But from your perspective, what makes Pointer Athletics different, and how does the community and fan base play into that as well?
Well, I think what makes it very special and different is the fact that this league is one of the best, was one of the best NAI leagues, and is definitely one of the best Division III leagues. Secondly, there is tradition. And I go back, our family goes back to Bob Kruger. Bob was very close to our family. My brother and I used to work camps as a high school coach. And I know that when my brother came here, there was some rebuilding to be done. He did it, had a couple painful years, but I could see that quality, doing things the right way, was going to get this program where the fans wanted it to be. Sometimes fans get a little anxious when the quantity isn't there, when the numbers of wins aren't, but when you have patient fans, and I think that's part of what Stevens Point is about, knowledgeable fans who are patient, they see if progress is taking place. And it has, it's continued through all the coaches that have come here. And I think our fans, well, I remember coming to games when I was a high school coach, when my brother was coaching, and Bob Engelhart was his, hey, Coach Bennett, open the door. We want the Pointers out on the floor. Those great, great crowds. And I can remember especially the last 5-6 years, how the fans were just unbelievable. In fact, we may talk about special games, but one of those special games was the last one I coached on this home floor, when we had to beat what was, I thought, and I know a lot of my players felt, the best team we played the last year we won the national title, and that was Trinity of Texas. And it was packed. It was absolutely, I think the crowd helped us get over the top over a team that I just thought was supremely talented. So, yeah, it's the fans. It's the players who committed to this school. It's the coaches that I was honored to work with. I mean, all the assistants who volunteered. And then, of course, Kenny Cable and Bob Semling, who both have gone on and had very outstanding head coaching careers. That's what makes Point special. The community, the fans, and this university that I think treats those student athletes the right way.
So you'd mentioned the Trinity game, and obviously we have the 2 national championship games. So I'm going to take those 3 off the table, Coach.
Okay.
Put you on the spot here a little bit and say, you know, you've had a lot of special moments, obviously with the titles and the big wins. You know, are there a few moments or a moment in your career as a Pointer that kind of stand out for you that, man, it's, you know, when you go reflect back in your mind, it's like, man, that was just a special moment in time for you and maybe for the Pointers?
It's ironic that you've asked that. People know the Menzel family in this community. Jim Menzel, who was a great player in his day, for some reason the last 2-3 weeks has been emailing me about that kind of question. He knows tradition and the whole family there. I mean, Steve has been a real close friend. And I had to think about this. I'll tell you, I'll give you a couple of moments. The very first year, we had to rebuild this program a bit. And the very first year, we were invited to the NCAA. It was the first time Stevens Point got the invite to the NCAA tournament. We had a good season. We had a good season. We had some real nice players. I start mentioning them and then I'll leave somebody out, but fans will remember Mike Painter, an all-conference player, and Dan Denniston, Jim Danielson, Russ Austin, just to name a few. We were beaten twice that year by Platteville. I'm telling you, I think this was Bo Ryan's best team that didn't go very far. Our tournament assignment was we had to win an early game, and then we had to travel out to Pomona Pitzer, Los Angeles. Third, we beat that team. They're a good ball club.
Yeah.
People who don't know, Coach Popovich started there. The great San Antonio. You know your basketball.
Yep.
All right. Platteville, I don't know if they were defending champs or they had won it the year before. They played Oshkosh on that Thursday at home. Okay. We had to fly back and play them Saturday on their floor, cross-country trip. All right. Got some advice from a number of people because I thought we'll fly back, we'll go back to the university, then we'll bus down there. And the best advice I got from a number of people was, don't do that. Fly into Madison, get a hotel in Platteville. You're on a mission. Keep your kids together. Well, I'm leading up to, you asked about a special game. We beat them that night 46-43 on their floor. And I thought that was the game that really ignited. You talked about fan support. It brought all of that passion back at that moment. We went on, we beat Mount Union out at Nebraska Wesleyan, and then got beat on a last-second shot by Nebraska Wesleyan, and they were runner-up at the national tournament. That's one of the special games. Two others, I already mentioned the Trinity of Texas game that got us into that second national title Final Four. But before that, the first year, 3-4, we had to go over to Gustavus Adolphus. The year before, they had beaten us. They came over on our floor and they just out-toughed us. I was impressed with them. They were runner-up at the national tournament that year to Williams. Now, the story will get connected. I hope you don't mind me winding this thing through.
No,
but we went over there and we beat them, the craziest student crowd we ever played in front of at Stevens Point. They were a mini Duke crowd, chanting names at our players. And we came back after getting beat on our floor the year before with basically the same players, and we beat them by 11. And I thought that was a defining moment where I saw in our players' eyes, you know what, we've got a chance. We can play with just about anybody. That was one game. The final game I'm going to tell you, and I don't even know why I'm bringing this one up, because this is probably the most painful loss we had here, but it was also the start of us getting to where we wanted to be, was the year we were co-champs, I believe, with Eau Claire, and I think it was Eau Claire we were co-champs with. We beat them in the WIAC championship game on our floor, and that's when the old bleachers were in. There were about 5,000 people there. It's the game, God rest his soul, the great sports writer Don Friday was there covering it and had his stroke at halftime of that game and just passed away about a month ago. One of the best fans of Pointer athletics that you could find. We beat them in overtime in that game. We had to play them to go to the Final Four in, well, I tried to purge the city, Storm Lake, Iowa.
Yeah, Buena Vista, yeah.
Yes, Buena Vista. We beat, I think, University of Chicago. Heck of a game. We took a 2-point lead with 2.8 seconds left. And they had a kid named Sherm Karstensen, who was a Division I player. They ran the old Velpo play, and I blame myself. I didn't put a guy over the ball. We tried to match up, tipped it, boom, he hits the shot at the buzzer to go. That one was as tough a loss as you can experience. And I think, as you well know, Brad, not just in our family, but in any coach's lifetime, it's those disappointments that sometimes spur you on. That was the night Nick committed to us. He was crying in the locker room. He said, I know this doesn't mean anything. He committed. About a week later, Jason Kelso committed to us. We started to rebuild, little knowing that that was going to result a number of years later in the first national titles. Those are the games I remember most, other than the national championship game against Williams, which was as good a game as you're going to see. Winning the next year against a good Rochester team by a huge margin, and just having those kinds of moments. So a lot of warm memories.
Absolutely. You mentioned a couple in there. One player in my playing career scored 40 on us. That was Dan Dennison, Pittsville High School, put 40 on us. That guy could really shoot the basketball. I mean, he was a heck of a player. Yeah.
And you understand this being a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Dan had to sacrifice some of that when I came here. I told him, I said, I'm going to use you as a point guard. I didn't think we had a pure point guard, but he was the closest thing.
Yep.
And he did. He scored. He could score, but he certainly could have scored more if it had been geared around him. Yep. He didn't have to be a James Harden.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a Marcus Howard, for that matter.
He could sure score.
He gave up. He did. The whole was greater than the sum of its parts, and those guys heard that from the time I took the job, and they committed to that, and they won that big game down at Platteville, which I thought set the stage for the goals that point basketball has been able to reach since then.
Well, you mentioned something there that if you're a true pointer and a fan of ours or a player of ours or an alum of ours, you every day when you walk into the gym, you walk under a little acronym, GIYBALWI, something you taught me in the first time I ever met you here as the AD. And something that, is really shaped even through these hard times, Coach. I want you to know I want you to explain it to our fans, but I want you to know that plays through my mind even now every day is, did I GIYWALWI, did I do that today? So I want you to talk about that to our fans, to our student athletes, what that means, and especially through the hard times we're going through in America right now.
Yeah. Just call it Jib Elway. That's how we always referred to it.
Yeah.
A lot of my former players are using it now as coaches. Steve Hicklin down at Lake Mills, Nick, and others, Jason when he's been assisting, and even Tony, my nephew. I think people have heard of Tony Bennett around here.
That's possible.
He used it a few times with his Virginia teams, and certainly, as you well know, 2 years ago, the kind of challenge they went through. And then last year, they're still, I guess, the defending national champions with the season ended. It was simple. It was probably more of a message to me than anyone else, because sometimes you get so intense, whether it's that fear of failure, whether it's we've got to do. I finally probably did that way too much in high school. I said, John Wooden used to say, peace of mind comes as a result of knowing you did your best to become your best that you're capable of becoming. I said, that says it all. Mm-hmm. It doesn't fit on a hat. It's not a neat little slogan, but that says it all. And I said, what kind of says the same thing? And I said, give it your best and live with it. Give it your best and live with it. And we used to put that on our board. I started that really in high school in Rapids, and then used it at Rhinelander. I don't know if I used it every game, but when I came to Point, it was probably the first message I had to the team that was returning. Fellas, I don't know how many games we're going to win. I know what expectations might be with some fans. All we want to do is play the game the right way, play as a team, and let's just give it our best in practice and off season, every game, and we can live with that. Mm-hmm. That's where it's from, and I still think it's something that I wish I had practiced a little earlier in my career.
Well, I can tell you, Coach, it's helping me every day, going through these unprecedented times without a playbook. But you know what? The family, the Bennett family, which I know you and I sometimes go back and forth on, but I call the first family of basketball in the state of Wisconsin. 7 NCAA championships in the family. And, I think people certainly know your nephew, who's done a heck of a job at Virginia. You have 2 as a head coach. Your son's got 3, 2 as a player and 1 as an assistant coach. And your niece, who's a dear friend of mine, Kathy. Now, women's basketball in our conference only has 3 total national championships. 2 are pointers, and 1 kind of is a pointer. That's Kathy winning 1 at Oshkosh, undefeated. 7 NCAA championships. Talk about that, Coach. What's been the key? What was it like to win 1 with your son? And I know that winning the gold trophy doesn't define the Bennett family, but there are 7 of them sitting around. So, what was that like for you, Coach?
What's that slacker brother of mine doing, right?
Yeah. Only take the team to the Final Four.
Once in a while we'll get into a basic, but the NAI was tougher. That was tougher. And they were, as Point fans remember, they were runner-up in 83, I think, 82, 83, to that good team out of Kansas.
Yeah.
Can't remember their name right now. I know they were good. That was Terry Porter's junior year. Dick's set the foundation here for it. We were fortunate to reach that level. And I can tell you this much. I started wondering if we were going to get there. This didn't happen. I was here my last 9 years until year 8 and 9. And in fact, and this is a tribute to Shirley, when the women, and Megan, if she's here, and when they won it in 2002, I thought, I wonder if we're ever going to get there. I could see how excited they were. And I don't know if it was Shirley who said this to me or one of her players, something to the extent, when you get on a roll, you just don't want to get in the way of it. And I thought, you know what? There's some truth to that. You have to coach, don't get me wrong, but you trust your players. And in fact, there are only a few special teams. And I can think of a couple of my high school teams, a number of them, but not that many. A number of the teams here at Point, they transcend their talent. They simply play so well together, so unselfishly. They play with toughness on defense. They're a complete team. They might not even be the most talented team that you coach, but it happens every now and then. Those last 2 teams did that. They really did. I know my brother talked about, it was just in the Madison paper, his Final Four team, he said they went beyond what they thought. And I do remember mid-year, they were just over 500 a little bit, but boy, by the end of the year, they played at another level. They elevated. That's what happens sometimes. And you're right. Having a son involved in those 2, that team that I told where we lost that disappointing game to Eau Claire, I think we'd have won it that year. It's easy to say. We had Brant Bailey, an All-American. We had my son Jay, who was playing on that team, Brent Larson, Gabe Frank, Joe Zeiker, Josh Izerloth off the bench. But you never know if you're going to get that break. And that's why that first year when we were able to beat Platteville, a really good Platteville, one of their best, I knew we were at least moving towards that. And then when we were able to go over and beat Gustavus that very first year that we won it, that opened the door to the possibilities. Yep, Nick was part of that. He was the assistant, as we well know, at Whitewater that year. In fact, he had to coach 3 games when Pat Miller was getting surgery. And the first game he had to go against was Bob's 20-0 Point team. Whitewater hadn't beaten them, and they nipped them in an overtime game. They went on to beat Superior in lacrosse. I told him, I said, you should retire right now, 3-0. he's, and I know we're going to talk about it, I think he learned a lot from his experiences as a player, but mainly as an assistant coach at the Division I level at Whitewater, and now as a head coach at Racine St. Cat's.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. You've had a lot of success as a family, and certainly you at the high school level. Your son's on the trajectory, certainly, but, kind of followed in some footsteps here. What a year. I mean, unfortunately for a lot of players and programs and sports across the country, the disappointment of not being able to finish the journey. But talk about what Nick and his guys in that community have been able to do down there at St. Cat's. And I had a chance to see him twice this year. What a nice team he had this year, huh?
They had a great team. And it's unfortunate. There are only 3 teams in the state that finished undefeated. They were 25-0. I think Cuba City, Jerry Pettigrew were 24-0. And Stratford over here by Marshfield. You feel bad for that. What he's been able to do is rejuvenate a really tradition-rich program. Goes back to the great John McGuire, who coached there and then went up to Milwaukee Marquette, and Bob Lech, who coached there for 42 years. He's been able to rebuild it step by step. And the only wisdom you can give a young coach who's just taking over really his first head job is be patient with yourself and don't lose sight of the quality of doing it the right way. There'll be some pressure. They had to rebuild it. Well, what they did this year is they beat a lot of Division I programs. Smash, Rapids, Lincoln. They beat West Dallas Central 90-57, and they were our Final Four team year before. A lot of excellent D2 teams, Elkhorn, Beloit Turner, Lake Mills, Westosha. And they simply were playing their best basketball. They beat Dominican High School twice this year to win that conference. That was a team that had Antetokounmpo, Alex Antetokounmpo. They had another 6'5", 6'6" kid who's going to St. Norbert, will be with their top recruit. Unbelievably talented. And in the last game where they could have tied, Nick had some very talented perimeter players. Biggest kid, 6'4". This talented kid had 41 points, 9 for 12 from 3. Tyrese Hunter, he's a junior. He'll be back. And he's already got offers from the University of Florida, from Marquette, from Northwestern, from Minnesota, from Texas A&M, and all of the mid-levels. And he's just a wonderful player, along with all the others. Nick's been able to get that team to play team basketball and to play both ends of the court. Very, very high. I made a lot of trips down there. I know my way to Racine better than I ever thought I was going to learn that. I know you know Milwaukee from your days at El Vernal, but it's not an easy trip, but it was a worthwhile trip there in Milwaukee when they played the Milwaukee teams.
Well, Coach, I just got one final question for you. If you could, there's a lot of young coaches on our staff and a lot of veterans, but a lot of young people in our programs that aspire to be coaches and leaders, and whether that's coaching or teaching or nursing or running a business, they're interchangeable. If you could go back and give yourself, one piece of advice, something along the lines of, if I only knew then what I know now, what would you tell your young self?
Well, the worst part is I did know it back then, but I didn't practice it. And that is simply to enjoy the moment more. Sometimes we get so wrapped up, and it's not always the fault of a coach or players who put too much pressure. Sometimes communities can do that. Fans can do it. But it primarily comes from us. And whether it's your faith, whether it's your family, whether it's your belief in groups and learning from disappointment, simply to try to enjoy. And don't get me wrong, it's a lot more fun to win. You enjoy that. But to find the lessons in disappointment and to actually be grateful for those lessons. I wish I had learned that a little earlier. I think I put more pressure on myself in high school than even I did here at Point. But I think people last longer. And it's probably something that maybe the Italian heritage that my brother and I both had from parents who were very, very intense, very emotional, very loving, that you get that. I think my wife was able to bring me back a little bit, especially when we had our own children. And then when I coached both of them. I coached Jay in high school at Rhinelander and here 8 years straight, and we still talk to one another. And Nick, she said, well, just enjoy this. This is going to go by real fast. And it did. It can't be 15 years since we won that last title, but it is. And that's the biggest thing I would tell coaches. You better love it in the first place. If you don't love it, if you're just getting in it because you think it's going to add to my salary, or it's kind of a neat thing, a hobby, then don't get into it. You got to give it your best and live with it. But try to enjoy the steps, the good times, the bad times, and learn from it. And a relative who really taught that lesson to all of us was Tony. After being defeated, the first 16 to beat a 1, he handled it as well as a human being could have. And then the storybook ending was to win it all the very next year. So that would be the lesson.
Well, Coach, thanks for your time. To our fans and to Pointer Nation that's out there, thanks for taking the time to listen to the second Wisdom Wednesday. We'll be back next Wednesday with the third edition. But as tradition has started in this, I'm going to leave the final words to our Hall of Fame and national champion head coach, Jack Bennett. Coach, take it away, and we're going to close with you.
Brad, I first of all apologize for rambling on too much to anybody who might be listening, but you prime the pump, and I just try to give an answer. I know sometimes I go way too long, so I apologize. The only words of wisdom I would have is to the players who come here and to the coaches who are trying to build the program. And this is a very stressful time. No spring sports, having the winter sports and basketball in particular, it is affecting recruiting. It's affecting summer camps. It's affecting you as an athletic director. That's why I said that at the outset. Doing something like this, you're a pretty smart guy, Brad. You know how to get in touch with people. But I will go back to the idea. Bring people in here who have a willing, able attitude. Even if they're not the most talented, they really want to be good. They want to work hard at their program. Coaches have to do that. Players have to do that. And then in the end, just be thankful if you've given it your best. You can live peacefully with that. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Coach, and we'll see you all next week.